Are you experiencing anxiety and overwhelm running your interior design business? Well, you're not alone. And today's guest, Melissa Morris, is going to help us out with that. Stay tuned. All right. Hey, kids. Welcome to Designed by Wingnut Social. I'm your host, interior decorator Darla Jethro Powell. And today we are going to overwhelm ourselves. And we're going to underwhelm ourselves. We're going to get out of overwhelm with today's guest, Melissa Morris, and talk about productivity, managing team members, and profitability for your interior design business. Always great to get a different perspective, and Melissa Morris delivers in spades. But before we get into my conversation with Melissa Morris, Instagram for interior designers is on fire. It is it's burning up. You better get in there before it burns away. Head on over to wingnutsocial.com or go to wingnutacademy.com. That Instagram for interior designers is our on-demand, online, complete course from soup to nuts on how to handle Instagram, how to create an Instagram strategy for your interior design business, from branding, value proposition, content pillars, imagery, advertising, UTCs, metrics, anything that you would need to do to become an expert on managing your interior design firm's growth and marketing on Instagram. And I am not kidding. I am not blowing smoke, folks. That is a true thing. You even get a certificate at the end saying, woohoo, look at you. Look how smart you are. You little Instagram marketer, you. That course now is $1,297. $1,297. And it is value packed because if you sign one client from your Instagram efforts, what is that? A 10,000 average design fee, 15, 20,000 for some of y'all more. Really, you can't beat that with a stick. Is there going to be some elbow grease? You're going to have to do a deep dive. You're going to do some learning and figure out your branding, your messaging, your voice, your ideal client, your value proposition. Yeah, but that's what the course is for. It walks you through that with workbooks and everything. Head on over to wingnutsocial.com to find out more for that, wingnutacademy.com. All right, guys, let me tell you about today's guest. Melissa Morris is the founder of Agency Authority, a project management and operations consultancy for agency owners. Now, Darla, I know you own an agency. Why are you bringing a consultant for agency owners for interior design business? Well, yeah, she advises agencies. She's a productivity and operations management, but that's just her niche, right? She specializes in this for done-for-you service businesses, owners who have that kind of business, right? And guess who that is? That's us. That's interior designers. So Melissa and her team help business owners and their team members do the work that they love without sacrificing client satisfaction, the bottom line, or more importantly, their own sanity. Melissa, where were you 5 years ago when I started this business? Because I think the sanity ship has sailed. Wingnuts, help me in welcoming Melissa Morris to the show. Hey there, Melissa Morris. Welcome to the show. How the hell are you?
I am very good. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. And you're a first-time agency expert guest that we're having on here who definitely helps with overwhelm and productivity and hiring. But in the green room, of course, we were narrowing that down. And you just really help all done-for-you service-type businesses. And guess what? That is what... that is my audience in the interior design space. And boy, it is a crazy, complicated business model done for you, luxury, white glove, and all of that stuff. So we're going to talk today about how we can help interior designers, identify and define overwhelm related to that crazy, the logistics of this business are insane, and how to increase productivity by maximizing their employees. Are you game?
I am so game.
Alrighty, so super cool. So as I said, you do have agency experience, but just tell me and tell the audience a little bit more about what makes you an expert in the done-for-you service kind of advising space here.
Yeah, great question. So I worked in ad agencies for a long time, and a majority of that time was actually in a boutique agency. So we were working with a lot of government organizations. We were working with some nonprofits. And because it was this boutique agency, there was about 10 of us wearing lots of hats, obviously managing scope, managing deliverables for clients, client expectations, And, when you're working with government contracts or nonprofits, those dollars really have to stretch. We need lots of documentation on what we did and how things are going. So in general, managing clients, managing client expectations, giving them what they needed, creating a lot of visibility for them was a big part of my job. And what I found is that really, regardless of the service that you are providing, when you're working in that space where you're doing work for a client and we need to make sure we're establishing expectations and we have to navigate their feedback, whether in this instance it was like, why is it that radio station or why is it that sofa? We need to be able to navigate that and make sure we're being really clear about our vision and our plan and taking them into consideration, and then keeping, scope from bloating where, a budget goes from a little to a little more to a little more, right? And making sure we're managing that well. So that's where I've started to shift my energies, is just helping business owners really lean into that.
Yeah. And thank you for that. Thank you for diving deeper into that. As an agency owner and interior designer, I had an interior design business full time in Miami. I can tell you that the overwhelm in, of the big high level, seeing everything and being overwhelmed by it is a real deal. So I guess let's just dive into that piece first in the overwhelm. If you have an interior designer out there, and in the pandemic, we all, as interior designers, most of us, I should say, went crazy, just bat crazy with people wanting to redo their homes and taking their travel budget and instead of traveling, redesigning their homes. And we were crazy, overloaded, overwhelmed. We were batting off clients with a stick and back orders and furnishings and stuff. And that's toned down some a little bit, but I'm hearing from interior designers that they're still overwhelmed with projects and clients, and they don't know which way is up. So what are we doing to start? Speaking as an overwhelmed person, sometimes what are we looking at?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that we can start to do is understanding our own workflow. And that's really just understanding how long is it going to take to complete a project. And then, like I said, kind of in the beginning, managing those client expectations, managing internally what we need, and having a really clear view on those key deadlines to keep a project moving. Why this starts to become important is because it helps you then manage your capacity or your team's capacity. Mm-hmm. If we understand that when we look at a project from start to finish, there are probably ebbs and flows in the work, right? Like we're getting started, there's lots of brainstorming, maybe we're collecting color swatches, we're looking at Pinterest boards, we're just having lots of conversation, there's a lot of, brainstorming going on, maybe some work there, but then there might be maybe a little bit of a lull as far as the client is concerned, where the designers may be spending some time looking around and putting together their ideas and then coming back. So thinking through that whole process of where are there times where it's going to require a lot of you and your team, those moments where maybe your client is doing some gathering on what they like. Maybe you've asked them to, put together those Pinterest boards, or they're reviewing some things you've put together or finalizing some budget. There's going to be these back and forth. And then also understanding, well, how long does it typically take me to do a living room, a whole house, a bedroom? Right? And then really piecing out that timeline, because then it starts to get easier to layer in projects. So you can start to throw on just a living room during a whole house project when you've identified there's going to be a little lull right here where maybe you could fit some of that in. So what we're really trying to do is just get a handle on your capacity and the natural ebbs and flows that come along with a project.
How much of this is related to experience? Like if you're a newer designer and you're not really familiar with the amount of work that you can take on, or you're not in a spot to where you can say no to clients, right? Is it inevitable to go through that learning phase of just being overwhelmed and kind of, monkey football analogy?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Or can
do.
we just out of the gate just say, okay, this interior designer mentor said this usually takes 4 weeks to do. Let me just project that out, not to be overwhelmed. If they're out there in the audience and listening that don't have experience, where do they begin to even gauge it?
I think that is a great place to start. So yes, I think, ultimately as all business owners, we have these weird moments where we're just kind of navigating it, right? And we're like taking the client and we're like, we're just going to have to figure this out as we go. And I might not sleep for a few nights, but we're going for it anyway, right? Like we've all been there, and that's, welcome to the business owner club, right? If you're in that space right now.
Yeah.
But I do think looking to other mentors, asking in communities, I think there are some things you can do, particularly in the space we're finding ourselves these days, checking on, is furniture often still on back order? How are, is a certain brand of tile or certain flooring, just kind of trying to get a good gauge on some of that stuff. Cause I think those are the things that particularly in, the world we're living in right now could really start to blow up your timeline if you're not keeping a pulse on that. And then, trying to build a baseline, building in buffer time. I'm a big fan of building in buffer time. So that means, if you're like, oh, I can do this in 4 weeks, tell 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
A client's not going to be mad if you get done early. They're going to be delighted. But they are going to be upset if you say 4 weeks and we're pushing 7 or 8 weeks.
Yeah. And that happened a lot in the pandemic because we had no idea. I had a sofa that I ordered for a client. It was a custom leather sofa. It took a legit year. And the client's project was done. I don't know what they were sitting on, but they weren't sitting on that sofa for sure. And you have the groups and the mentoring right now that are available on Facebook, and I could list a million. They're so plentiful to go in there and ask questions if you're a new designer. And as a new designer, when I opened up my firm in 2017. Incredibly helpful. But I did take on a lot of stuff and said yes to a lot of stuff and overpromised timelines because I didn't know any better. And, you're learning. And I was very close to, I didn't tell clients, oh, I'm new, bear with me, I'm new. And this is, let's take this, because, I had this thing in my head where I had to be, not new
Right, yeah.
for the client. But I like the transparency level of that. If you're a newer designer, at least just saying, this is maybe a timeline I'm not as familiar with, but let's shoot for under promising and over delivering.
Agree.
That'll be helpful. And we try to do that here at the agency as well and not overbook ourselves, and definitely have to leave 10 or 20% to putting out fire time.
Yes.
Because when that happens, if you're booked so tight, when you think everything's going to go so perfectly, it's not. You have to have some time to put out fires. And right now we have a wait list at our agency. Wingnut Social is an agency for interior designers, digital marketing agency. And I'll tell clients, maybe 6 weeks out from creating content when it might be 5 or 4.
Yeah, exactly.
But maybe not, right? I like to give us that cushion. Yeah. So that's a really good idea, not to be so hasty to say, you have to say yes to a client or to bend over, it's okay to take a deep breath and to compose yourself with these pieces and when doing a project.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, if they can make it 6 weeks, could they make it 8 weeks? Like they would be okay, right? Like we're not, when we say buffer time, we don't need to bloat it by, weeks or a couple months. And then I think another key thing too is just being in open communication with them. Yeah. And when you're bringing them on, maybe sharing some things that maybe we are still recognizing happening right now. Like if you say, hey, like for the most part, we're good, but I have found occasionally things are still on back order or they're going out of stock very quickly. We'll be mindful of that. But just a heads up, that's something I'm going to be looking out for. And I think just also, keeping them in the loop too on how they can support the timeline. So I'm also a big fan, when I'm working with a client and we've got plans. If I'm trying to get something automated for them, but they're really dragging their feet and they won't verify the tool that I want to use, or they're not giving me their contract, I can't automate a contract you haven't given me yet. And, so I loop them in and I say, in order to keep our timeline, this is how you can show up and meet that timeline. And it's going to get me things that I need and get them quickly and get them ready for me to work on. And I've actually found that a lot of clients really appreciate that. They want the project to be a success too. They want this work done. They're excited to get it done. And I would be willing to bet that if they were aware of some things that they could do to help keep things moving, they would do it, right?
Yeah, I like that a lot. And that's something I haven't given a lot of thought to. And I'm not inclined to do that. I mean, at the agency, I have people that do that for me. But as an interior designer, I wasn't inclined to do that because I'm a people pleaser by nature, first of all. And I would always bend over backwards and I would be nicely remind them, hey, this isn't done, this isn't done. But never from the angle of, hey, if you want this to be on time, if this is your piece. This is your piece of the project. And I never did that. I never really did that. I would remind them nicely and, a billion emails, but never with that vision in mind to keep everything going. I like that. It makes them accountable. Good. And it also puts the ball in their court.
It absolutely does. Like it kind of puts some onus on them. If you, and one of the ways that I would always like to phrase it is, I know you were really excited to have this completed by the end of the month. And I still think we can pull that off. But in order to make sure we meet that deadline, I need you to pick the sofa by Thursday. And giving them those like deadlines, right? Mm-hmm. And that's, or don't pick it by Thursday, but then this could further delay and keep them in the loop. Because I think sometimes too, they've hired you because you're the expert. You know these things, the order things need to happen in, and they may not realize that, the sofa seems like a silly example, but like, no, I can't move forward until you pick the sofa. Or until you pick the paint color. And they may not realize that this is really holding up a series of other events until you let them know. And then they're like, oh my gosh, like I thought you could do all of these other things, right?
Yeah, that's a good point, because when we design everything, it's synergistic, it's cohesive. And so that one element could be holding up the whole thing. And we take it for granted that we know what we're doing. So everyone else should too, to educate them a little bit on that process. So that's a really good point, to make sure that you're very clear with setting up the expectations of their piece, and that to help you help yourself.
Yeah.
Not go
Jerry
crazy.
Maguire, help me, help you.
somewhere in this head of hair, I have gray hairs from, my past experience with work.
Die.
There's some color in there too, but they're popping out there for sure. You guys can see my gray hairs on Designed by Wingnut Social on our YouTube channel. Go check that out. Okay. So this is some terrific advice to do this, to slow things down, take a deep breath, identify, pull things apart. And I really do love making the client more accountable and helping you in that. They don't even really know that they're helping you with your overwhelm, right? Okay. So, and we're talking also about increasing your productivity by maximizing your team. Now, one of the things that I see here, even at the agency with clients, with my friends who are interior designers, is that we are notorious control freaks. As creatives and business owners. Maybe that's not an interior design thing. Maybe that's just business owners. And delegating something, when we have our name on the shingle, and it's our business and our design and the whole thing is the Darla Powell show or whatever. Yeah. Delegating that to employees or important pieces to employees can be a crazy challenge for us. And we've talked about that before on the show, but you have an angle, how to increase productivity by maximizing your team. Am I on the right track with where we're going with this, or what are you thinking?
You are on the right track. So the best way to maximize your team is to create a lot of clarity around expectations and workflows. Are we noticing a trend? Expectations, workflows.
Yeah, we struggle. I struggle.
And I think most business owners do. Mm-hmm. And this is why I really like to have this conversation, is because, most do. Mm-hmm. And so when we're thinking about, again, our workflows, like I mentioned a little bit before, what are some of those key moments, right? First, it's maybe like that inspiration, those initial designs, that concept, that mood board, whatever that starts to look like. Then it's client buy-in. And then it's, what are those next steps and pieces? When we can get really clear on that, we can start to make sure each team member knows what piece they own. And when a team member is really clear on what piece they own, everybody rests a little easier, because what this does is this cuts down on those internal meetings. Hey, did you do that? Hey, did you handle this? Hey, did you handle that? we all know what's going on. And then like the cherry on top is when we can get that going in a project management tool. And we're really able to track, because then as the business owner, what you're able to do is you're able to go into your project management tool and see exactly where each team member is in the design process, in the project that they're running. And we start to really cut down on those internal conversations. We want to get away from what I call the task managing and get into the project managing. We don't just want to piece out tasks and you go there, right? Like we want to be project managing, and we want everybody to know and own their part. And then what that does is that allows people to go and really work and be in their zone of genius.
Okay. So let's break. So task managing. So if I'm thinking in my head as you're speaking, the difference between that and the project management is, let's say I'm Susan McNuggets Interior Design, and I have a staff of 2 or 3 designers, and I'm just kind of like reactionary, assigning them things as we go, and there's no real set structure to that.
Yes, and that's where we can get into task management. So let's say, for example, you know, Susie McNuggets is in charge of the furniture, and we can say, you know, did you order the couch, and did you get the end table, and start just piecemealing off these things. Or we can look at holistically and say, like, living room furniture is on you. Do you have the 6 pieces, the budget, right? And again, like that's a very kind of simplistic view, but intentionally. So now we just have to focus on living room furniture, right? And not, hey, did you get that table? Yeah. Hey, did you get the accent chair? No, we're just, and then you can just track that. Like, tell me if there's a roadblock in living room furniture. If there's not, then we all know you're going to have it done by the 15th, and we're going to be good to go.
Oh, I love that.
And then the second piece to that, and this is like my little secret weapon, is your communications SOP. So this is a very handy SOP, so standard operating procedure, that you can use with your team members, and then you can also have one with your clients. And what this does is this will empower your team members by giving them some guardrails and letting them know when they need to phone a friend, i.e. let the business owner know what's going on. So for example, we will have some very clear guidelines, like we always respond to a client's request within 24 hours or whatever that starts to look like. We always, if we haven't heard from them, we send 2 follow-up emails, and then we do a phone call. If we, because what we don't want to, and this is where you mentioned that control freak moment starts to happen, right? Because we all do it. We start to worry, like, well, what do you mean you haven't heard from them? When was the last time you emailed them? Where are they? Like, why haven't they approved this, right? And what we don't want to happen is we ask our team member, has Susie McNuggets, has she given us the paint? Like, has she, you know, approved the paint palette yet? And they're like, no, she hasn't. Well, when did you ask her? Well, I sent her an email last week. And as the agency owner, you're like, last week? Like, what do you mean? Like, you should have followed up again. Or like, why have you checked in? And they're like, oh, well, no, I didn't know I was supposed to. Well, they didn't know. So what's important is we get everybody on the same page. So now you're not lying awake at night thinking, oh no, did they email? Did they check back? Have we heard from them? Because everybody's playing by the same rules of the game. And so now your team member knows, okay, you send one email. If within 3 days you haven't heard from them, you send another email. If a few days later you still haven't heard from them, you let me know. So now you don't have to worry, like you can rest easy because you know if any red flags are coming up, you're going to be brought into the fold. So you don't have to go constantly asking and looking for the red flags. Just let them come to you.
I love that. And you're not really getting that reactionary anxiety with, like, you were just like, oh no, she didn't put, what's wrong? What's, you know, it's getting handled for the most part until it needs to be handled by you as a business owner.
Right.
I like that. I am prone to anxiety myself. I think I'm going to put this into my,
Girl,
my agency communication. I'm telling, being a business owner is stressful, y'all.
I often wonder, like, chicken or the egg, like the anxiety and then the business owner, or do like you have to be a business owner to get the anxiety?
Yeah, I don't know. We're a special kind of crazy, let me tell you.
Aren't we though?
Okay, so you're streamlining and making sure that you one person on furniture, maybe another person's liaisoning with the the contractors or however it is, but are they always, is this one person always handling the living room furniture? Are we changing around in each project? How like rigid are we getting with these SOPs?
So I think that can start to become a little bit team specific. So obviously a smaller team, we might be wearing more than one hat.
Yeah, for sure.
So as long as I think we're keeping team members in their zone of genius, and having them doing things that they're equipped to do, trained to do, and feel comfortable doing, then I think that's okay. And then in which case you're having a project kickoff. So when the project kickoff happens, that's when we're like laying the groundwork for you're in charge of these pieces, you're in charge of these pieces, right? But what we want to avoid is constantly shuffling that around, right? Like we start and you're in charge of, being the liaison with the contractors. And then we go for a couple weeks and then we're like, oh no, never mind. Now you're in charge of being, you're in communication with the contractors and you're going to go do X, Y, and Z. I think that we want to try and avoid. I think, when we start that project, let's get clear on who's going to handle what, divide and conquer, and then really let that go unless we're really like running into a situation that calls for a team change.
And I think that's like the method of operation for a lot of small interior design business owners is that they are just kind of winging it and assigning things on the fly and as we go. And so I like what you're recommending here and discussing, because if you look at the larger firms, the larger architect firms, larger interior design firms, they have their locked down. Yeah. They have this going, and they started having it going in order to get where they are, if that makes sense. English is my first language, believe it or not. So I think this is a terrific idea to build foundations to grow into that larger firm to scale. And speaking, I did have a question. So this is related to what you said. It's a zone of genius, right? What was that book? The Big Leap.
The Big Leap.
By Gay Hendricks.
That's exactly where it comes from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what do you do if you have two team members who have a redundant zone of genius?
That's a difficult question. Look at you.
That,
yeah. So that's a good point. And you may find that again with a small team. And what getting really clear and delegating these responsibilities will do is they will actually shine a line on gaps, which is really the bigger problem, is the gap. Okay. So if we have both doing really well, that could then just start to become based on capacity, like who has space to take on. Maybe you're just passing projects back and forth until you have enough work to be having them both working on projects simultaneously. But my bigger concern would be, do we recognize any gaps that we need to bring in? Like, is somebody maybe not strong at keeping contractors in line and getting them on the phone and figuring out why they didn't show up, right? And all the things. I think that's the more concerning piece, is the gaps than the redundancies. Or, it would be unfortunate too if you found yourself in a situation and you look around and you're like, gosh, we're all actually just really good at paint. We need some people who can do the furniture piece, right?
Yeah, we need to brush up on your furniture skills there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I like that a lot. So let's talk about maximizing the team and increasing productivity, right? We can see to where what you've recommended here are really establishing great foundations for a successful relationship with clients, with your employees, with scaling if that's something that you want to do. Well, let's talk about how maximizing the team and this is probably obvious, but maybe you have an answer that isn't, leads to more profitability as a business owner in the design space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when we're avoiding, like we talked about, a lot of internal conversations, what are you working on? Did that get done? Is this handling? And we've already created all that clarity and people can move quickly. Obviously, it's saving time, right?
Okay.
Same thing if we know that they're getting in touch with the client, they're keeping the project moving. Keeping that project moving means you get projects completed more quickly. You can do more projects. So when we're really getting everybody working effectively and really maximizing them and their strengths, what it's really doing is creating a lot of time savings. And then with that time, we can either do more projects or, take a nap.
I vote for take a nap. I'm a true Taurus. I will take a nap at any time. So this is great, Melissa. I love it. And you have to remember too, designers in the audience who are listening. So a lot of times, especially when we're new to this business, we're thinking, Design, make room pretty, happy client. Had an ugly room, had a pretty room. But it's way more complicated than that. It's their experience with working with you and the professionalism and how buttoned up and everything was together. Even if furnishings is delayed, as long as you're staying in contact with them and advising them and they're not guessing or having to come to you to ask you what's going on. But just these things, like internally, you're like, okay, great. Maybe that makes a great business and I'll have less anxiety, but how is that really helping me with my business? Which you, of course, you spelled out terrifically there. Melissa, is there anything that I've forgotten to ask you? And then we could do the 10-hour show on this, but just with relate to what we've talked about here that I've forgotten to ask you, that you think the audience needs to hear before we get into the fire round?
Yeah, I would just say really, I can't talk about it enough, those workflows and getting really clear on what's going to happen every step of the way and trying to get that documented somewhere, really getting these things out of your head and down on some paper because it will help you start to see where you're glossing over. And it can also be useful to speak with somebody who's not in your industry and talk them through this because what they're going to help you do is improve your client experience. Because like you said, it's easy to forget what your clients don't know. And not realize because you don't remember what it's like to, you may never know what it was like because, that's, you guys just have such an eye for that kind of stuff. And you may not realize how hard it is for somebody else to see or know how these pieces come together. So walking through your workflow and kind of walking through that client experience with somebody who's not familiar with the design industry, I think is very valuable.
I agree. It's great to have that objective viewpoints because your clients aren't interior designers and you want to create that experience for them. Terrific. There's one thing I did forget to ask you before we get into the What Up Wingnut round is what PM software do you recommend?
I really love ClickUp. I think it works really well for a lot of business owners.
We had experience with ClickUp for the course, working with the course designer. So it was pretty good. It was pretty robust.
Good. It is a robust tool. Yeah.
Very. All right. Melissa Morris, I have to ask you, are you ready for the What Up Wingnut round?
I'm ready.
What would the hashtag on your tombstone be?
Hashtag work-life balance.
Love it. You're stuck on a deserted island, but you can have your favorite food for all time. What is it?
Favorite food for all time would be spaghetti.
I love it. With what kind of sauce? Are we doing meatballs?
I'm a purist. I love the spaghetti. Give me the long stringy noodles, put some marinara on top, and I'm a happy girl.
All right.
Oh, and parm. I need my Parmesan cheese.
There. You know what? Yeah, you won me over with the parm for sure. And last but not least, please recommend a book that has impacted you either personally or professionally.
Well, we've already talked about it, which is probably why I said Zone of Genius, and it's The Big Leap. Yeah, I'm actually reading it again right now. It's a book I love to come back to. I think it is just so smart and just cannot recommend it enough.
I've read that book a million times, and that book had a tremendous impact on my interior design business. And as soon as I read that, I hired a couple people, delegated the CAD work out to them because I had no clue and no interest in doing it. And that stuff started growing. The book's a little woo-woo in spots, but just if you're not a woo-woo person, just, don't worry about that. The general advice there is terrific.
Solid. Yes, it is solid advice.
It's solid. All right, Melissa, please tell the audience where they can go to find out more about you, and we will call it a day.
Yeah, you can head over to my website, youragencyauthority.com. And if you go to youragencyauthority.com/call, you can hop on a quick call with me if you have any questions about what you heard today. Or you could always hop over to LinkedIn and find me at Melissa V. Morris, V as in victory, and shoot me a DM.
All right, we'll have to connect. I'll shoot you a little DM on LinkedIn so we can be little LinkedIn buddies.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right, folks, we hope you enjoyed that excellent guest, Melissa Morris. Remember, if you want to find out more about Melissa and her services, head on over to youragencyauthority.com. And remember, that's her niche, but she specializes in done-for-you service-based businesses. And who has two thumbs and has that kind of business? This girl right here. If you aren't subscribed to Designed by Wingnut Social on the YouTube channel, you're going to want to do that because the bloopers are something else. They are a work of art. They're a thing of beauty. They can only be appreciated in the video format. Thanks to my producer, Nicole Lyons. So head on over to Designed by Wingnut Social and just get a whole new vibe going on over there. I love to watch YouTube and multitask while I'm working on the sofa. I work from home, don't hate. And I'll be typing up my little emails and have YouTube going off in the background. It's great. It's a friend of mine now. I even sprung for like the no ads because I watch it so much. So, anywho, I love YouTube. I digress. Guys, that's it. Remember to tune in on Monday where we have our Monday mini news sesh where with either tips or social media news going on there. And every Wednesday, of course, we have our full-length guest interviews. And remember, until next time, to get out there, get uncomfortable, and be great. Are you experiencing anxiety and from doing a podcast and not knowing what you're going to say next? Are you experiencing not knowing what to say? Are you experiencing anxiety and overwhelm? God, always great to get a different perspective, and Melissa differs. All right. So where was I? so we're okay. So where was I? All right.